Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. We are going to talk to you today about completing the EIDL loan application, which is the economic injury disaster loan. For those of you who joined us last week, we offered step-by-step guidance for completing the PPP application. The EIDL application is what we're going to hit today. Let me start off by saying we've gotten some disappointing news from the SBA over the last few days, and they've indicated that although it was not included in the initial guidance and in the initial rules that we received, there is now an imposition of a limit of, rather than the $10,000 emergency grant funds that were supposed to be available immediately, the SBA has changed course and is allowing $1,000 per employee to be forwarded as a part of that grant fund. So there were a few other changes that we will get to and talk about, but for the most part, we wanted to be able to take you step by step through that application. I'm joined today by my partner in the CPA firm, Kunz & Parkin, Marina Parkin. Thank you. And let's jump right to it. Where do I file? How do I apply? The EIDL loan is a loan that you can apply through the SBA directly. You'll see the website, COVID-19 relief, SBA.gov. The nice thing is you aren't required to find a bank that can help you. You just can go straight to the SBA website. So that part is also a little bit easier to utilize. For those of you that have already applied for EIDL, we have had some folks who have waited a few weeks and haven't received a response, and I've also had folks who applied last week that received notice of their approval, and we had our first client email earlier this afternoon and say she actually received her funds.
Yeah, I've been hearing the same thing, that people are slowly starting to receive some of these funds. And actually, quick question too before you get into it was, if I haven't heard anything, do I need to reapply? And I would not advise to reapply at all.
More is not better.
More is definitely not better. It looks like they are getting back to people. It does take a while, but if you were able to apply and get some sort of a confirmation that you have applied, I would hold off on doing anything else.
Yeah, even for the PPP as well. These things are just taking some time. So be patient and stick with it. Your bank or the SBA will be in touch. Just understand they're dealing with lots of folks and changing rules to the game as we go. This part's been especially frustrating for us as professionals and advisors. We've been guiding everybody and doing the best that we can, and every night we watch kind of with our eyes like this, peeking through, saying, what's going to change now? That part is frustrating. So just bear with us. We'll keep you up to date. That's why we keep popping onto these things. It's, you know, we're doing all we can to keep you guys in the know. So let's dive into the application form. This is a little bit more straightforward than the PPP application. So you've got some questions here to answer. The same 500 employee limit applies. So the reason that they ask for the business name, not only who this business is, but who the owners are, is they're looking for the affiliate rules, which preclude one owner from having 500 employees in total with respect to the applicant. And if there is a bigger business, they will need to make their own applications. So that part, you know, it seems like for a lot of our folks, it's not going to be an issue. And that just wanted to bring that to everybody's concern. The applicant can be a nonprofit. Of course, that's not the bulk of who we expect on this call, so I'll skip over some of those alternative types of businesses. Let me also say that you can be a sole proprietor, however. That means you do not have any kind of business structure, be it an LLC or a corporation. You can be an independent contractor, which also does include our real estate agent friends. And you may or may not have employees. There's no requirement there. But again, this was more appetizing of a program to get involved with when the full $10,000 grant was available, and that just changed Monday of this week, if my memory is correct, which is risky at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
It's all changing so fast. So you're again required to make some additional attestations here that the business is not engaged in any illegal activity. No principal over 50% ownership, is 60 days delinquent on child support. The applicant is not a farm. The applicant does not present live performances of a prurient sexual nature. So I guess they're really hurting, so they might need the program more in these days, but you have to not have that kind of business. I think we're good in our tax return roster, in our business law roster, that we don't have any of those. Applicant does not derive more than 1/3 of gross revenue from legal gambling activities as opposed to the illegal ones. Applicant is not in the business of lobbying and cannot be state or government. Obviously, we don't have any trouble there. So here's the meat: your business legal name. The trade name is going to be the fictitious name or DBA if you have one. If you don't have one, you can leave that blank. Tax ID number for the company is the employer identification number, or if you're a sole proprietorship or have not formed any kind of company, you might be using your social security number there, and that's fine as well. When it comes to the organization type, it's going to give you some drop-down choices: LLC, corporation, S corporation. It's been a lot of chatter about how to properly classify, because for many people, more than one organization type applies. You may be in a sole proprietorship. You might also be an independent contractor. How do I know which one to pick? Same thing when it comes to maybe an LLC, also taxes an S corporation. These drop-down menus certainly don't contemplate real life, so they're asking you to make a choice when more than one answer might be correct, although it only allows you to select one option. If you are an S corporation, we've been advising folks to go ahead and check that box as well. Are you a nonprofit, and are you a franchise? Now, the franchise one becomes interesting because if you are a real estate agent, and let's say you work for RE/MAX, RE/MAX is the franchise, not you as the independent contractor real estate agent. However, if you own and operate a franchise business and you are the franchisee, you would say yes here. So that's the distinction in that category. Let's see, if I'm a PA with one employee, just myself, do I check box 1 or box 2? I'm not seeing which box you mean. Let's see if I can go back in my slide. Kathy, I'm not sure which box you're referring to. Can you help me out? I'll keep moving then.
I would think that if you, maybe the question is, and maybe Kathy will clarify, but I'm thinking that if you've got a PA, that would be your legal name. That's what you would put in that first box.
Okay. I'm not sure which area she's referring to. So.
Okay.
All right. Next page we'll get to is gross revenues for the 12-month period prior to the disaster. So again, this time frame runs differently than the PPP. So PPP starts on February 15th. Here you've got to be in business by January 30th. So the first day of the disaster they're calling is January 31st, 2020. So this is talking about the rolling 12-month period from February 1st of 19 through the end of January 2020. Cost of goods sold is something we get a question about quite a bit. And that's because it doesn't apply to many businesses. Cost of goods sold is an accounting term to contemplate maybe manufacturing or any kind of assembly. If you were a bakery, your cost of goods sold would be your materials. So it'd be your sugar and your eggs and your milk and your flour. So if you're assembling materials in order to produce your product, you would have cost of goods sold. If you were providing a service, you're unlikely to have cost of goods sold. Sometimes we do see cost of goods sold characterized with some sales activity, but for the most part, that was not going to apply to a service business. For rental properties, here you can identify your lost rents as a result of the COVID-19 disaster. I don't believe have any nonprofits here, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. Combined operating expenses for the 12 months prior This is for faith-based entity. We don't have that. We can skip the next box there as well. Compensation from other sources received as a result of the disaster. So this is contemplating if you have any other funds that are coming in. And
like, for example, insurance proceeds. Because remember, this application is for different types of disasters. So this is your standard application for when you have a hurricane. And many times you will have the insurance reimbursement for some hurricane damage. So this is taking into account that you may have had some of those proceeds come through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a little explanation of that. Some folks have made attempts to collect under business interruption insurance policies. That's proven to be difficult. It's shocking because you'd think this is precisely the thing that business interruption policies would cover, because clearly many businesses have been interrupted. But as is the case with any insurance contract, although they're painful to read, they primarily are addressing business interruption from a physical standpoint. So if there was a fire or a hurricane and there was physical damage to the property that prevented you from opening, that's really what those policies typically relate to. However, if you do have a business interruption policy, you should contact your agent to determine if you have coverage for this. How are we doing on questions?
Kathy sent her question. She was asking on the very, very first page where it says only check one. So if you are a PA with one, I guess one employee
Herself, yeah.
who is herself, does she check box 1 or 2? Let's see if you can move maybe back, because that's going to be a common. Okay, here we go.
I'm not seeing where she's talking about, because when I was
so
back
I
here,
guess the first box would be, are you a business with no more versus are you an individual?
I would say you're here.
Yeah.
You're going to be box number 2, Kathy. And the reason for, go ahead, Marina, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's exactly. So go ahead, you're good.
So the reason you're going to pick that is because even though you're organized as a PA and you do have a business, if you don't have any other employees besides yourself, then you really are primarily operating as an independent contractor, real estate agent in that particular case. So let me pop back to, we're done here. This is kind of like the form at the doctor's office. I don't think we need much description here. If we do, then there's bigger business planning problems here. The business was established, if you don't recall, you can pop on sunbiz.org, which is our state divisional corporation's website, and to search for an entity, you'll find your company and you'll have an opportunity there to see the date of formation. It's also on your tax return if you have that handy. The date that the business was created should be on there as well, particularly if you're filing an S corporation tax return, that is on there. Current ownership should be the same unless you have bought an existing company. If you've done a stock purchase, we do have some clients who might be attending that have been purchasers of stock. You would use the date the business was established from even before you owned it, and then the current ownership would be the date of your closing when you acquired the business. The business activity, this has caused a little bit of questions too in my email. I don't know about you, Marina. People have questions, how do I know what my business activity code is? So
I did get some questions about that. I feel like what we use on the tax return as classification is the same one that we could be using here.
For sure.
So if you've got a tax return in front of you, it would be the code that, depending on what kind of return you have, there's going to be a code next to your activity. If you're filing Schedule C as an independent contractor, it's in the top, I believe, right corner of Schedule C. If you are an S corporation, it's going to be on the left side at the top of the very first page. They're in a little bit of a different place. So if you're having trouble finding it, where exactly it is on which form, I know the forms have also changed from last year, so I may be completely off and misquoting the spacing. So if you've got a return in front of you and you need help pulling the code, just shoot me an email and I'll let you know where to look.
Yeah. Marina, can you opine too, before we get too far, this page here with compensation from other sources received as a result of the disaster, have you heard anything about whether that's including the PPP loan amount that you've received if you did apply for PPP first?
You know, we haven't seen really any guidance on this, but this may not be a bad place to put it. Again, because they're probably trying to make sure they're not giving you the same loan for the same use of funds. So the nice thing is that there is a box underneath it with a description available where you can put. So I would put the PPP on there, and then I would put the description, you know, put the amount and then put the description. It may make it easier for them to process the loan, just because now you've disclosed that there's been 2 loans under the SBA, instead of them having to hunt down for it.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Now, we've done current ownership and business activity. Number of employees as of January 31st. So this is just strictly head count. And now this has been added because they're doing that per head count, $1,000. The $10,000 emergency grant funds was originally what they indicated you would receive, but now they're, because of the popularity and also because the scarcity, the funds went very quickly. In both PPP and in the EIDL program, the funds went very quickly. So there is still some money left, but they have run, I think, a little faster out than they thought they would. So now they've limited that assistance to $1,000 per employee. Now, it says as your business...
Actually, Joanne, before you move on, again, to reiterate on the very last one, number of employees, if you're a self-employed or independent contractor, please put 1.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, that makes sense to us, but it's good to say out loud. All right. Moving on, here they're asking, is your business owned by a business entity? Again, this is getting to not only the affiliation rules about the 500 employees, but there are also certain instances where they're saying, hey, those sub businesses need to be making their own application. So if you say yes, it may kick you out and say you can't apply because that, instead of the top business, the owners of the business that are also a business need to go make their own application. So that's why that's there. For our real estate agents that are operating on a team, this has caused a little bit of a predicament. So it's not mirroring real life, unfortunately, and that has caused a little bit of confusion. Just to clarify, the $10,000 emergency grant fund is not a limit on what you can apply for in terms of the entire loan. We're going to get to how the loan is calculated in just a minute. It's that $10,000 emergency grant fund is possible to be processed prior to the processing of the loan application. The design of it was to get money in people's hands more quickly without a full review of the application, just to get, you know, a bridge in place immediately to provide urgent assistance, and then for the SBA to have time to sort through the application. You can apply for a larger loan than just $5,000. I'm only talking about the $10,000 emergency grant fund. The maximum loan amount is $2 million. We good there?
Quick backtracking here on the codes. A couple of people have responded and said that the application has been simplified a little bit, not to get into those detailed codes. Yep. I think like the old applications, but more into just some simpler choices, which is probably going to make it easier for you to pick who you are.
It is, and you can see here this business activity line item. This is a drop-down box. So I couldn't make that live in the slide, but you don't have to put the code in here. You did have to put the code in the PPP application, however. Okay. Are we good there?
So far, yeah, there's a couple of good questions, but I'll ask those once we're through maybe this next piece.
Perfect. Okay. So the individual owner, this is where you're going to put your name, and I would put your cell phone number. I would not put the business phone number unless it rolls over to your cell phone. My husband actually received a call from his bank on his PPP loan on a Sunday afternoon. So I'm encouraging everybody to use a cell phone, something you'll have access to even outside of business hours. They're asking for the ownership percentage. So even if it's 2 spouses, you're going to have to both be listed at 50-50 or 51-49 or whatever your breakdown is. They're going to need all of those owners. I believe the PPP application asks for only those over 20% ownership. However, this one is asking for everybody. Okay. Email address, social, date of birth, place of birth. We've had some clients who have asked about, what if I have a green card? What if I am in the middle of an immigration transition? Marina, can you talk about that?
Yeah, I did a little bit of digging kind of around, and then I did go on the SBA side to look. This is how I understand it. So if a majority of the business is owned by a US citizen, you're fine. However, if the majority, so we're talking about 51% ownership or more. If a majority of the business is owned by somebody who is not a US citizen, you should still be fine as long as you have some sort of a residency status that is legal and you actually reside in US. That is how I understand it. In addition to that, SBA goes on to say that at that point, it kind of becomes up to a bank to see what their tolerance is for lending to non-US citizens. They may require other things like maybe additional collateral. Maybe they will put the requirement in place that says you have to be in business for at least a year, which is now relaxed under these CARES Act rules. I'm not sure. Now, this application we're going through, this is not going into the bank. This is going to an SBA. So I think that if you check here that you're not a citizen, and it probably will get into what's the ownership of the business. Again, if you're 51% or more, there may be some additional questions here that they will ask on your residency, like that you actually reside in US and what is your legal status here. So if you may be a green card holder at this point, or you may have an E2 visa or something like that. So they will get you to where you can put all of these things. And I think that's going to be the key here.
Okay, thank you.
We haven't had any from experience that I can say yes or no. So I can only speak from the guidance that I read. If we get some people, that are not, I encourage everybody to let me know what their experience is so I can push that on to you guys. So we'll keep you posted if we hear anything otherwise.
Perfecto. Street address, city, state. All right, here we go. Some more question and answer. In the past year, has the business owner been convicted of a criminal offense? Yes or no? I'm not touching that one. Is the applicant suspended or debarred from contracting with the federal government or receiving federal grants? Are you presently subject to indictment, criminal information? Have you been arrested in the past 6 months for any criminal offense other than a minor vehicle violation? So, if you have questions or concerns about how to answer those questions, let us know privately. If anyone assisted you in completing this application, that person must enter their information here. This is interesting. The SBA has been very clear about their disdain for others being involved, which I think is interesting because the rules are not clear. They're changing constantly. And as a lawyer, I'm suspicious of anybody who says don't get a lawyer involved, admitting my bias. So what they're trying to do here is make sure that nobody is being subject to predatory practices where someone says, okay, I'll help you get a $50,000 EIDL loan if you split it with me. That's not obviously what they're going for. So this feels worse, I think, than it really is intended to be when you fill that out. Like, why do they need to know who helped me? They're not trying to chase anybody down to get them in trouble unless they should be, because they're not being fair with the applicants. This is certainly a new road here. So again, keep in mind this EIDL program is an existing program. This is not a brand new initiative. It's been reopened in response to the coronavirus, but it is not a brand new program. Here is where you could check the box to say, I'd like to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000. You put in your bank account details. I had several people reach out and say, that's odd. They don't even know if they're gonna approve me. The reason they're asking for that is, again, aspirationally, they were expecting to provide those funds to you within 3 business days of providing the application to the SBA. They can't give you the money if they don't know where to send it. And they're fans of sending that money digitally. So because you're submitting this on the SBA website, it is secure. You don't have to be concerned about providing that information. Okay. Alrighty. Now, You do have to authorize the SBA to have your records released by any lenders or banks or financial institutions. They do have the right to pull your credit. They do have the right to deny you the benefit. They do have the right to ask for more information. This is a credit-based loan as opposed to the PPP, which was not. They have made revisions to this loan program, however, and stated that the credit requirements have been relaxed. So in prior years that this EIDL program has been utilized, they required collateral and personal guarantees of the owners of the company. For this program, they have softened that requirement and said, unless you are taking a loan over $25,000, they're not requiring a collateral of the business assets, and they're only requiring a personal guarantee for loans in excess of $200,000, and they are not requiring a pledge of real estate on behalf of any of the guarantors, which in the past they typically have. Another rule that's been relaxed with respect to this program is historically the EIDL program has required applicants to have demonstrate that they've exhausted all other loan possibilities, and that is no longer the case with this EIDL loan program. So you are attesting under penalty of perjury that the statements that you're making in this application are accurate. That's it for the paperwork, but let's talk about any questions that have come up, and if we need to backtrack into the application, we can go take a peek.
Yeah, I'd like to, let me first say one thing here about the relaxing of the requirements. One of the other things, I'm not sure if that was mentioned already, but in the past, the requirement was that you had to be in business for at least 1 full year. That's no longer a requirement. That's also been relaxed under the CARES Act. So I think that when you are including the amounts for 12 months, I think that here you're not, if let's say you've been in business for only 6 months, you still include your full 6 months. You're not going to do any proration here yourself. So include the results as you have them. And because there was a box to say when the business was started. So you're not going to get automatically kicked out if you've been in business less than a year under this program anymore. Let me run through a couple of questions, Joanne, that have come up here that we can address. So first of all, if you've marked something wrong, like you said, oops, I have 0 employees, or I have something, or I put the wrong code or whatever, can you go back to this thing, or do you just wait for them to ask you when they're at processing you?
I have not been made aware of anybody's experience where they've had an opportunity to make an amendment to this application. That being said, I haven't had any clients yet get to the point of anything other than the emergency grant funds. So the emergency grant funds, even if it's just the $1,000 that some of our clients have received already, that part doesn't indicate that they've even looked at your application yet. So I can't say it's not going to give you an option. I can just tell you I haven't seen that come up yet.
Can you have funds in the bank when applying for assistance? Yes. They're not looking at your assets here in this particular loan. I believe that's the case. I think you're fine.
Shelley's saying on the back page, there's a place to make an edit. Is that after you submit that application, Shelley? I didn't see that. That being said, we haven't had tons and tons of these go through because people have been pushing the PPP loans, so.
Good question too. Real estate agent with many customers canceling plans to list or buy, and so basically there's going to be lost income. I believe this loan is for covering your expenses, really, more so than replacing your lost income. So this is not going to look at the potential of closings that you're losing. This is looking to keep you alive and have your expenses covered while you're waiting for that to go back up. That's how I understand this. This is why this loan is really based on, your operating expenses and your, being able to cover those. But the question too on the top was, well, where do you enter these expenses? This one was the simplified application for the 10,000. Was there a place here where you had to enter your financials? I don't think it was.
No, you just, in the full application, we just had the, just the line item with the revenue and the operating expenses in the beginning. Here, let me get back there. Here we go. Yeah. So this is talking about your revenue, your cost of goods sold, rental income, and the combined operating expenses are not detailed in this section, but listed in this section. So the permitted use of the funds is for payroll costs. Again, you cannot double dip with the same payroll costs that you apply for a PPP loan. But if your PPP loan runs out and then you applied for EIDL, or if you were ineligible for a PPP loan, you could use payroll costs in this EIDL loan. You also can provide sick leave to employees. You can use your mortgage payment, not just your mortgage interest, rent, any increased costs to obtain materials due to supply chain interruption, and repayment of obligations other than those that cannot be made, other than those above, meaning mortgage, rent, etc., that cannot be met due to your revenue loss. So the only factor for the revenue loss is really demonstrating the substantial economic injury that you've suffered, whereas under the PPP loan, you just had to show that there was economic uncertainty, which everyone was deemed to have had. So you do have to have some lost revenue or lost, at least impact or injury from the business, but the loan proceeds aren't meant to replace income. The income replacement was the PPP loan. This is meant to fund the operating expenses. So they are a little bit different. The working capital that you can use these loan proceeds for is more broad than what was available under the PPP loan. The downfall is this is not forgivable as the PPP loan is. Speaking of that, I don't want to get into it today. You can pop on tomorrow. We're going to be going over. We had additional guidance dropped by SBA last night with respect to the PPP loan, with some changes that they've made, and also with respect to, we finally got our first piece of guidance on the debt forgiveness component. So tune in tomorrow at 10 a.m. for that. But with respect to the
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
I'm so excited. Go.
Right.
I'm not getting in front of a Russian.
Right? Questions are popping up about multiple businesses and who's going to apply for what. So each business can apply on its own. And even if you are the owner of multiple different businesses, you as your business can apply. You are going to be the one who's going to sign the application as the authorized signer, but every business, because you may have different types of businesses. The question too on the rental properties, and I think this is where it may be situational, but if you've got a couple of rental properties under one LLC, I would say you can apply by LLC. If you, so let's say, Joanne, if you have an LLC that holds, 5 rentals, that LLC would be the one making the application, showing the total rental revenue, operating expenses and such. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
If you've got, for example, there's some clients that put each rental into its own LLC. I think here, if those LLCs are just disregarded for tax and flow up to your personal, I don't think you need to make 5 LLC applications. I would think here you probably will be well served to maybe apply for all of these disregarded entities in total under your personal name as the LLC holder. What do you think, Joanne? What's your opinion on that?
If they have separate tax ID numbers and they're all owned by you,
and they each hold 1 rental, so you're going to have maybe a couple of thousand of expenses in each, if that. This is where it may get, I guess it may depends on case by case, because filling out these applications will take you a while. One application may get processed faster than the other. Yeah. It probably will depend on how big of the expense we're talking about. If you've got these rentals with substantial expenses, I would say each LLC should apply. If
Yes.
there's a couple of little rentals and you've got 5 of them under each individual LLC, but in total, you know, maybe your total expenses don't exceed 10 to 15 grand, I would probably say apply as one owner. So maybe we look at that case by case. If you guys want to shoot some email, we can think about that, what would work better.
And we can also ask around. We do have a few contacts at SBA that we can attempt. Obviously, getting at those people is tough, but we do at least have a channel to try to get some more guidance answered. And we're watching the FAQs that they're dropping, everything that they've been dropping, other than on Monday when they advised about the $1,000 per employee limitation to the grant. Everything else they've been dropping has really been relevant to the PPP program. Does the stimulus check count as compensation from other sources? I would say no, because that stimulus check is personal and this is a business application.
Correct.
When does the loan have to be paid back? This loan, you do have a deferment period where you do not have to make any payments for 1 year. And then once the repayment begins, the interest rate is 3.75% and the maximum amortization is 30 years. They don't have to give you 30 years. It will depend on the loan amount. So if you have a very small loan, you're not going to have 30 years to repay that. But we haven't seen any indication to say, oh, well, loans from, you know, say 1 to 50,000 are X and 50 to 100 are Y. We don't have any guidance on that yet. As I said, the maximum loan amount here is $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what else we have.
Couple of questions on, you know, we advise don't apply for the same thing on both loans. What if you already did? If you already did, leave it alone. Let them figure out what you've applied for and what you haven't. This is only for those that are going forward. I think, not to say it may slow down, but you know, I think on these SBA loans that are going through the bank, the PPP loans, you may get a call back from somebody who's actually looking at it to say, you know, you didn't put this here, or maybe your PPP loan is in progress. I'm not quite sure yet how that policing is working, if it's an automatic thing, if it's in the SBA records, but if you've already applied for both and you put the best, if you've done the best you could do, you're on the right track. Just wait for them to get back to you. Joanne, can you switch back to that front page too that was asking for revenues and expenses?
Sure can. There you go.
I think there was a question that says there was no place to put expenses. I think you've got a line item there that says combined annual operating expenses. That is right below the cost of goods sold. So you've got gross revenue, then cost of sales, then the line item that's just for rentals. And then below that, once you get past the nonprofit, there says combined annual operating expenses. This is where you would put your expenses. Okay, I think I answered a couple of people were asking about that.
Okay.
They do not require tax return or 1099s. Nope.
Because again, they're not based on income, so they don't really care about how much you made. How do you determine your loan amount? That's a great question. It's 6 months of your operating expenses. So you have all of the permitted uses of funds times 6 months, those average monthly expenses for those items. Someone says I put my gross commission as the gross revenue, but didn't fill in operating expenses. It is looking for those operating expenses. It does ask for the revenue. It's not incorrect to put that in there. But again, this loan is contemplating repayment of those expenses, and it will look for the 6 months of those average expenses to determine your loan amount. This isn't where you go and say, I'd like to have X dollars. It's based on your expenses. It is correct that other than the up to the $10,000 loan amount, this entire loan is not forgiven. This is a repayment at 3.75% interest, and it will be amortized for a maximum of 30 years. Okay.
How does this work with employees versus the 1099s? I know that on PPP, we talk about each of your subcontractors that you give 1099 to should apply on their own. Would you recommend this work the same way, where if you're a subcontractor with a 1099 that you file your own application?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
How do people sign up for our tomorrow's webinar?
Oh, well, you're probably getting herded in. We're sorry for the flurry of email, but we're trying to keep up with this, and it's going at a dizzying rate. You can pop on, if you've attended this webinar, you will receive a copy of this webinar as well as the future invitations to everything else that we host. They're also scheduled on our website, so you can pop onto those and you can register right directly through our website.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. The emergency grant is forgivable. Whatever amount of grant money you receive, be it 1,000 or the maximum of 10,000, that does not need to be repaid. You don't have to do anything to evidence that you don't have to repay that. That's automatic. However, if you also applied for PPP, whether you did so before or after your EIDL grant, that up to the $10,000 emergency grant is going to be included in the debt forgiveness portion of your PPP loan. I hate to keep mixing and matching. We're trying to separate these and talk, that way people are only having to listen to what they're interested in. But many people did apply for both. So if you received up to the $10,000 emergency grant, that will be forgiven. The balance of your loan will need to be repaid. And the up to 10,000 that you may have received in the grant will be included in the debt forgiveness of the PPP loan. Are we clear there? Does everybody understand?
A couple of other questions on entering the operating expenses. You're right. I think Phyllis was asking, these operating expenses are asking by faith-based entity, not for all of them. So where would we be putting our operating expenses here? If you...
It's not giving you a drop down for cost of goods sold either. So there's not a place to break that down. And this is directly from the SBA website.
Amazing. You can't make this up, folks. You really can't.
What we'll do is I can chat in with one of the bankers and see if I would suspect if you put it here, even though you're not a faith-based entity, it would give you an opportunity. Or I think you could put it up in cost of goods sold and supplement with the breakdown later. That's what I would do. I would put it in the cost of goods sold line and have your breakdown prepared to be submitted as well.
Yeah, that's a good guidance there.
I can't do in preparation for discussing these with you is go through all the way an EIDL application. For example, when we submitted the PPP application, right before you hit send, I was able to upload our documentation through the bank portal that we used. So I could upload W-2s and 940s, et cetera. I don't know if you're going to be able to do that in the EIDL loan because I haven't personally gotten far enough along to actually hit submit. Because
I don't believe there's any place at all in here that's asking you for anything.
No, and when we grab these slides off of the application, I didn't see anything past that, but I can't tell you what will happen once you actually hit submit. This was the sample that the SBA provided to us. So if inside the portal it's different, I can't tell you that because I haven't personally seen that. If anybody has been through and submitted, it would be great to hear your feedback on that. You can apply just for the emergency grant and not take any additional funds over that. So if you want to just go after the grant, you don't have to apply for the balance of the loan. Phyllis said she did find no way to upload anything. That was my suspicion.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. Yeah, and you know, just looking at how this is where, you know, you've got the red thing and with the red stars that you won't be able to move on if you don't have anything in there. I would imagine that in the cost of goods sold is where you should probably put your operating expenses as well, because again, if you're a service industry and you don't have cost of goods sold, but you'll have some operating expenses. So again, the people that are doing the tax returns and looking at these applications and writing tax laws are all different people. So this may be completely counterintuitive to us, may make no sense to you guys whatsoever. So this is just kind of trying to make the best sense out of what can possibly go in there.
Our friend Patty replied and said that she filed an EIDL application a few weeks ago and they only asked for revenues over the period and did not follow up with her with any additional documentation. Patty, have you received your emergency grant yet? See what she's got to say about that. I would be interested. Someone asked.
Few of our people have received that $1,000 at this
We have
point.
had a few.
Very few, but I believe they're starting.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a question with respect to someone being a real estate assistant and saying, hi, can they use this? Could the employer use this to pay my salary? If it is W-2, absolutely. And she didn't apply for a PPP loan, these EIDL funds are available for payroll. Okay.
Question unrelated to this, unemployment for independent contractors update. As far as we know, you're able to apply as an independent contractor for unemployment. I know those applications are still a bit of a mess, but you can certainly apply. There are rules are now that you can apply for as a self-employed or independent contractor. You can make an application for unemployment.
Okay. Someone says, Maureen says, I am sorry, if I applied for PPP loan for payroll, but want to apply for the grant for operating expenses, does it still reduce the PPP forgiveness amount? Only the amount of the emergency grant is going to reduce the PPP forgiveness. Doesn't matter what the use of those funds are, be they payroll or be they operating expenses, that first $10,000 of the emergency grant fund will reduce any PPP debt forgiveness that you receive. Dimitri, if you have cost of goods sold and operating expenses, I would put them all on the second line on step 4 and just be prepared for the breakdown later. We don't see any additional place to provide that information, and you are definitely one of the businesses that would have both.
What is included in your operating expenses? This is all of your business expenses that you typically incur to earn your revenue. So if you filed your tax return last year, let's say you were on Schedule C, there's a list of your typical expenses included in there. Not all of them will apply to you, but you will have your, I guess depending on what your profession is, you'll have some typical expenses standard to you, but Schedule C of the business tax, of your personal tax return, which is the profit or loss schedule, is going to give you at least sample lines of what some of the typical general business expenses are.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty. I can't tell if these questions are old or if I'm confusing people. This loan is not forgiven except for the $10,000 emergency grant. I can't tell from the time on the stamp. I don't know what time it is now, if those are old questions or not, but I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So you can go after both the PPP and the EIDL at the same time. Just be very cognizant that you don't double dip the expenses. You can't put the same payroll into both loans. We had been advising folks to go for PPP first and then apply for EIDL. Number one, PPP funds are running out more quickly. Number two, this was designed to push people to the bank and not just deal with the SBA website. The SBA, when these programs were enacted, really preferred that people pursue PPP, and the PPP funds are forgiven, whereas if provided you have the appropriate use, whereas the EIDL funds are not. So you can do both, just don't double dip your expenses, and it would be more advantageous to apply for PPP first.
Relationship of unemployment to PPP or EIDL. If you receive PPP or EIDL proceeds, you're not going to be able to qualify for unemployment. So your unemployment will be reduced by the amount of PPP or EIDL proceeds you receive. Again, how that's going to get policed, I am not sure, but PPP and EIDL are federal funds, so they will reduce amount of unemployment that you can receive. So what we've been telling folks at this point is if you can apply and get the proceeds once you've got through them, they're meant to really cover you for just a few months, you can apply for unemployment at that time.
Mm-hmm. And also with respect to the backlog at the SBA, there is a backlog at the SBA and the bank. So from that standpoint, I've had some people come to me and say, should I do PPP and EIDL at the same time and see what hits first? You certainly can. That's not an inappropriate approach. SBA is the source of the backlog at the end of the day because they're the ones administering both types of programs. So that part's, I have no solution to the frustration that is coming.
A good question too, Maureen was asking is, do we need to submit anything after receiving the 10,000 to show where the money was spent? To the best of our knowledge right now, no. This is where it's different from PPP, where in PPP you're going to have to prove where the money was spent to make sure it was qualified use of funds. Again, I say to the best of our knowledge because the guidance is coming literally daily. I mean, we got some guidance last night, and so there has been nothing yet about how to use these funds. I just tell all my clients at this point, whatever loan proceeds you got, just keep track of where you spend it. Because in case this turns around and you will have to show, at least you've got your record of what expenses you paid in the time frame that you got, the money.
To the extent that you can, also, if you have a small savings account or an account with less activity than your primary operating account, it'd be really great to transfer your loan proceeds, whether they're PPP or EIDL, to that account and run payroll or expenses through that account, even if it's not your customary account. That way you can easily evidence that those funds were used directly for that purpose. Shelley did pop back on and clarify with respect to the edit possibility. She said it was before this, at the end of the completion of the application that you could review and do edits, but that was before you submit, not after. I thought, Shelley, when you first wrote that you were saying you could go back later and amend, but that's before you hit submit, before the final button push. So
question, do you have layman's terms explaining both options? We did a webinar last week that was specifically on differences between the different types of loans. So we encourage you to go on the website, kuntzassociates.com. There's COVID-19 resources section there, and all of our webinars are saved in there, so and take a peek. I believe that was last Thursday's webinar.
Yeah, it was last Thursday. Yeah. I will answer several questions at the same time. Yes, you may not have a status update. I would not suggest that hearing nothing means you were denied. I would simply submit to you that it's a long queue. I would not make any suppositions about denial. I don't think there's any way to follow up. I don't think there's any way to check in. They can barely process them, let alone keep people posted. The few clients that we have had who have already received PPP or EIDL funds just got deposits in the bank account. We did have several who received PPP funds that did get a formal email notification from the lender saying your application has been approved. You will receive a deposit of your funds within 3 days, and those, the few that we have had, those did happen within those timeframes. I know with the $10,000 emergency EIDL grant funds, it was aspirational that they were trying to provide those funds within 3 business days of the application, and that did not happen at all, even close. But with those with the PPP actual physical approvals, not submissions, but notice of approvals, those folks did get those in less than the 3 days that they were promised. Sharon's asking, do you know what the terms of repayment are if you apply for more than the $1,000 employee amount, per employee amount? And it's 3.75% over the 3.75% over the 30-year maximum amortization period. Sorry, I'm trying to read a question and answer at the same time.
It's been a lot of that in the last 3 weeks.
I know. My poor husband probably, when I get home, is like, I don't even know what you're saying.
The website again is www.kuntzassociates.com. I will type that out as well.
Okay, I think all of the other older questions in this chat forum we have answered. The correct order of application should be PPP, EIDL, and then unemployment. Ideally, yes. It's a little bit get where the getting is good. The PPP program is down to around $60 billion remaining in the originally allocated $349 billion of funds. We have heard lots of noise about an additional $250 billion of funding being applied to that. I do not know if that's going to happen or not. I'm a little bit surprised that it hasn't already. There's also been talk about expanding PPP from 8 weeks to 12 weeks. Again, talk, but no confirmation of that. So, you know, we'll keep you guys posted. We will continue to host these webinars and provide you the developments as they unfold. We're giving you all the information that we have. Know that it's fluid. Know that it's changing. Know that we're getting additional guidance from SBA every single day. It is frustrating, and for you as well. We understand that. We'll do everything we can to make that simpler, but it is definitely a project. Someone's asking, do we know any information on the stimulus payments? I do have one client who is a real estate agent who contacted me this morning to say that she did receive her stimulus payment by direct deposit to her account. Okay.
People are asking, again, unrelated stimulus payments. Yeah, they're starting to come out a little bit. IRS, and this is part of our webinar yesterday when we did the update, but real quick, guys, if you go on IRS's website now, there's a link in there that says enter payment information here. Even though it says for non-filers, if you have filed but IRS does not have your direct deposit, you can still click on that and enter your direct deposit info. So if you do qualify for the stimulus check, it's going to be direct deposited. If you don't do that, they're just going to mail you a check. It'll take a little bit longer, but you'll get it in the mail. So either way, if you qualify under the income threshold levels, you will get your check. But again, be patient with them too.
Another thing I see in the chat is Beth says, if your bank seems backlogged on helping submit this, should you go through the SBA ASAP? Let me clarify. Under the EIDL program, you are bound to apply through the SBA.gov website. Under the PPP program, you can only apply through an SBA lender. You cannot go directly to SBA for the processing of PPP, and you must go to SBA for the processing of EIDL. You don't have a choice. All right. All right. Well, that's about our hour. We will be back on tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If you'd like the update on everything that's unfolded since the last time we talked on PPP and EIDL. Thank you for joining us today. As I said, we're happy to be a resource. If you have questions, email us and we will get them distributed via the webinars so that everybody has the benefit of those answers as well. We will be submitting the recording. You do not have to email and request it. It will come to your email automatically. If for some reason you missed that, the recordings are available on our website, coonsassociates.com. They're also available on our YouTube and Facebook channels as well. So do not be alarmed. You will absolutely have access to it. Those are not going anywhere. Feel free to share them. I have had several folks email me and say, can I share your webinar, upcoming webinar with someone out of state? Everything we're talking about here is on the federal level. So it's absolutely, we're happy to have you share with anybody, no matter where they live, because they may find benefit in it as well. And that's what we're here for. So thank you so much. We hope you have a great day. Stay well, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good night.